When was the last time that you felt overwhelmed? Some of you are like, I don't ever get overwhelmed. I just ignore it. Um, I can tell you about the last time I felt overwhelmed. It actually happened this week. Um, Anybody else ever feel like sometimes the ocean can be a little bit overwhelming? Our family has randomly gone from being a one paddleboard family to being a four paddleboard family. And so we have been taking out these paddleboards, and my wife, did you come up with the phrase that we've been saying when we go? Who came up with it? Maybe Sadie. The phrase is let go and lagoon. I know it's bad, but we've been going to the lagoon with these paddleboards regularly, and we've there's six of us, but there's only four paddleboards, and so sometimes we're like piling people onto the paddleboards before we go out, and we're going to this like Agua Hedionda lagoon in Carlsbad. And the last time, the time before last, when we went, the kids wanted to go across the lagoon, which we think maybe is about a half a mile, and it seemed close, and so we said sure. And so a few of them took off with friends, and then I looked over, and a couple of them had made it all the way past where you're allowed to be, like further inland than the buoys say you're supposed to go. And they were still planning on trying to get across the river. So I'm here, they're way over there, and the rest of the party is over there. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm really good at paddleboarding. I'm going to go over there, paddle, just kind of go with them to the other side. And so I paddle over there. It was actually very easy to get over there. The wind just carried me over to where they were. And I'm like, all right, guys, we're going to turn this way. Just follow me. And so I start paddling, and I'm able to make some headway by myself. And I look back, and they have not moved. And I'm like, okay, I can make it out, but they have to make it out. And so I get this really great idea that I go back and I'm like, you know what? I take my leash off and I toss it to him. I'm like, just hold on to my leash, and I'm going to paddle, and you guys just hold on to the paddleboard behind me, and maybe I can get us out. And so I start paddling with them holding onto my leash. And I realize we're not going anywhere. And I keep paddling, and I paddle harder, and I paddle harder. And it's like the harder I paddle, the harder it is. And I look back, and they're just sitting there like, what are we going to do? And it felt like 3 hours we were just standing there. Like, not, if we didn't paddle, we were going further than where we needed to go. If we paddled, it's like we were staying there. My wife told me it wasn't 3 hours. It was only 45 minutes. But at one point, I looked up, and I was just like, I didn't tell the kids this, but I was like, I guess eventually someone will come rescue us, right? Like, I got to a point where I was just like, my energy is gone. We are stuck. I am overwhelmed. And I wonder if you ever feel that way. You ever feel like paddling, you're doing the thing, you're trying to make headway, do something, and it just feels overwhelming. I'll tell you, normally the lagoon is not overwhelming. It's very calm. I am overwhelmed regularly by the ocean, like the actual waves coming in at the beach. Like, I've tried surfing a few times, and with a couple exceptions, I am not a surfer. I go out, I get pummeled by the waves trying to go out, and if I ever make it past the waves to be one of those cool guys that sits on the board waiting for my wave, I'm exhausted. It's like, how can I ever catch a wave? I'm so tired. And so I'm overwhelmed not just by the lagoon, but by the ocean. Man, I get overwhelmed about finances sometimes. I'm sure I'm the only one who ever gets overwhelmed about the high cost of living in Southern California. Gosh, the rent is, or maybe it's your, mortgage or whatever it is. Maybe there's debt that just feels overwhelming to you. What is it? Sometimes I feel like our calendar can be overwhelming. Anybody else getting into a school year that's about to have multiple items on the calendar every year that are like, or every day, and it's starting to feel like, man, this is kind of overwhelming. Maybe there's a relationship that's a little bit overwhelming for you. Maybe it's a family relationship. Maybe it's a relationship you can't even get out of, and it's like, this is overwhelming. Some of you have toddlers in your home. That is overwhelming. They never stop needing you. I don't know how we ever made it out. I guess eventually they just grow up and they take care of themselves. It's awesome. Um, I think we're in this series. It's called No Longer Slaves. And the truth about going from slavery to freedom is that it can be overwhelming. It really can be overwhelming. Ask anyone who's found freedom. The journey from slavery to freedom can and does feel overwhelming at times. And we're not the first ones to experience it. We're studying the book of Exodus and God's people, Israel, as they went on their journey from physical captivity to physical freedom in this promised land that God was giving them. And I believe these Israelites multiple times got overwhelmed. And today we're going to read a story. It's an amazing story of a time where they physically and militarily got overwhelmed. And so the thing that overwhelmed them was not like an abstract thing like a lot of us. It was a physical thing. It was a vehicle. It was actually 600 of these vehicles. They were called chariots. And if you've ever studied ancient chariots, they are fascinating. They were made for speed. They were made for pursuit. And when you were on foot and the enemy was on a chariot, it was not fair. Isn't that kind of how it feels sometimes whenever there's something overwhelming in your life? Whatever it is that's overwhelming you, it just doesn't feel fair. It didn't feel fair whenever I was stuck inland in that lagoon and I was paddling against the wind. But for God's people, they had these chariots, and I have actually a picture from the tomb of Ramses II, which we think may have been the Pharaoh who told Moses no whenever Moses was like, let my people go. And on his tomb, they actually have this artwork of a chariot. And so you can see like multiple horses pulling this thin, like razor sharp, like chariot that had razors coming out of the sides. And there's an archer positioned on the chariot. If it's not already menacing enough, there were 600 of these chasing God's people after they left Egypt. And so if you're here for the first time, you missed the first couple weeks, go back online and watch them because they've been really helpful for us to talk through what the journey from slavery to freedom looks like. Week 1, we talked about how the first step in going from slavery to freedom is an encounter with the living God. And that's what Moses got to experience. If you've ever heard of a burning bush moment, that's what Moses experienced. He had this burning bush moment where God spoke to him through this bush that was on fire, but it wasn't being consumed. And after that encounter, it's like he knew that God was calling him to lead people from slavery to freedom. And even though he actually wasn't living as a slave when he got that calling, the truth was he was living as a slave to fear. And so a lot of times the slavery that we're talking about isn't a physical slavery. It's emotional, it's spiritual. And God set him free. And it was an encounter with the living God that started this journey from slavery to freedom. Last week, we talked about what does freedom feel like? And Holly taught us about this beautiful and really terrifying, tragic event that happened for the people of Israel. They had all these hard plagues that God gave Pharaoh and all the Egyptians that made life difficult for them, and the very last one was too much. It says the angel of the Lord took every firstborn, and it was the last straw. And finally, the people, they had to paint their doorposts with the blood of a lamb, and the angel of the Lord passed over the families of Israel because of his love for them. And so we learned that freedom feels like sacrifice. Freedom feels like obedience. And today, we're talking about how freedom can sometimes feel like 600 chariots chasing after you. So let's go to Exodus chapter 14. We're going to read quite a bit, actually. I'm going to read through verse 10 through verse 31. But starting in verse 10, here's what it said. Exodus 14. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Isn't it true that when you're overwhelmed, you start complaining? And even if you're on this journey from slavery to freedom, sometimes you just want to trade in the freedom for what was comfortable before. That's what happened to them. They were overwhelmed, and freedom felt overwhelming. The captivity of your past can sometimes feel safer than the risk of freedom. Think about that. Is there an area of your life where it feels safer to live stuck than to live free? That's what happens when you panic. And the truth is, the enemy had you when you were living as a slave. And the enemy wants you to stay enslaved. He doesn't want you to experience freedom. And you need someone to speak the truth into your life when you're in that place of panic, of overwhelm. And God knew they needed Moses, because listen to what Moses says in verse 13. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." I think someone needs to hear that statement right now. Don't be afraid. Stand firm, because you will see the deliverance the Lord wants to bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, here's what he says, the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. And I love this verse, verse 14. Put this up on your wall, write it on your mirror, make it your phone background. Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight. You need only to be still. Isn't it cool that that's who we serve? We serve the God who fights our battle and says, you just need to be still and let me fight this battle for you. Verse 15, then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and watch and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea." Listen to this. On dry ground. What? This has never been done before. Like, this is a famous image to us, but these people were like, "You're crazy, Moses." Verse 17, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen, those menacing chariots and horsemen that chased them down, that overwhelmed them. Verse 18, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And then if you keep reading, you see this did not happen instantly. In fact, it says there was a cloud, a pillar of cloud that they were following because God was leading them to the promised land. And the pillar of cloud actually moved. And the Lord positioned himself between Israel and the armies of Egypt. He blocked them. He didn't make a way in, he could have made a way in the sea instantly, but he chose to put himself in harm's way and say, I'm going to protect you for this moment so you can watch this miracle. He protected them. He created a hedge around them. Psalm 139, I love the verse that says, you hem me in behind and before. And that's what God was doing with his people. All night long, God guarded Israel from the armies of Pharaoh. And then if you go to verse 21, it says, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night, they watched this. The Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. I believe this really happened. And I wish I could have been there. This is one that I want to watch in the IMAX theater of heaven. God driving back the sea and making a wall of water on the right and the left. The waters were divided, 22, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and a wall on their left. Can you imagine how that must have felt? walking through a sea that was divided. And of course, just like God said, he had hardened Pharaoh's heart. And so the chariots, these menacing, overwhelming armies of Pharaoh, 600 chariots full of warriors, elite warriors, they followed them right through the sea. They started to come into the sea. And it says not only is God going to stop them by making the sea go on them, but it says God jammed the chariot wheels and he sweeps the entire army into the sea. This is what I love about going from slavery to freedom. Because the truth is, when you are enslaved, when you feel stuck, there is a power that has power over you. The thing that overwhelms you, it has power. But the truth is, when you find freedom in Jesus, the power that once held you hostage is destroyed by the living God. And that's exactly what they experienced. Verse 30, the day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. Pretty graphic. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. I want to pause right here because I think we just saw the whole point of why freedom feels overwhelming, of what we do when freedom feels overwhelming. Going from slavery to freedom, and really your life can feel overwhelming. If you're taking notes, write this down. Life can feel overwhelming. Going from slavery to freedom can be overwhelming. But everything that overwhelms you can and will be overwhelmed by the power of God. Did you hear that? Life feels overwhelming. Going from slavery to freedom, whatever your journey is looking like, it feels overwhelming. But everything, every single thing that overwhelms you in your life can and will be overwhelmed by the power of God. I've never been chased by a chariot. I hope I never will be. Sounds kind of scary. But can I tell you, those were not the only chariots on that sea. Those are not the only chariots that existed in the ancient world. They were just the only ones that were in plain sight. See, if you go over to 2 Kings, you learn what jammed the chariots. You learn, like, whenever the chariots stopped working, here's what happens, right? So in 2 Kings 6, Elisha is surrounded, and his servant is losing all hope. 2 Kings 6, 16 and 17, Elijah tells his servant, don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And then Elijah prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. I believe this is the spiritual reality all the time. There are invisible forces of angelic chariots of fire that are for you. So the chariots that we see around us, the things that overwhelm us, they're not the only overwhelming things around us. It's hard because we live in 3D, don't we? You know what 3D means? Like, if you have a piece of paper and you draw on it, that's 1D. And then if you have like a cube, like there's like a depth and a width, and then you add height, that's 3 dimensions. We can only see in 3 dimensions. We can only walk in 3 dimensions. Right? But there aren't just 3 dimensions. There's a 4th dimension that is more important than the 3 dimensions that we live in and walk in and see and touch and taste and smell. There is a 4th dimension that governs the 3 dimensions that we live in. And that's where the chariots of fire of God are. And some people, whenever we start talking about a 4th dimension, I actually read a book called The 4th Dimension. by a Korean pastor. And he kind of made this thesis that you can actually manipulate the fourth dimension. And I would like to say you cannot. You cannot manipulate the fourth dimension. Only God is in control of the fourth dimension. And so, if we live in 3D and there's this fourth dimension that we really don't control, what do we do? Well, it's really simple. You go back to what they did at the very beginning of Exodus 14. Exodus 14:10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and there were the Egyptians marching after him. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. So you and me need to call on the power of the fourth dimension, chariots of fire. We need to cry out to God. When you feel overwhelmed, this is step one. You feel overwhelmed and you cry out to God. It's like that's an instant reminder that, oh yeah, everything that has ever overwhelmed me or ever will overwhelm me can and will be overwhelmed by the power of God. Cry out to God. Cry out like Israel. They cried out when there was a new Pharaoh, and then they cried out again when the chariots came. Those of you who have babies or who have ever had a baby or who have ever watched a baby, you know they're good at crying out, aren't they? Nobody has to teach a baby to cry out. They cry out because it is instinctual. Because if they don't cry out, they're not going to make it. In fact, when babies are not well taken care of, they stop crying out because they learn that their crying doesn't do anything. That is not you and me. We have a heavenly Father who does not neglect us. He cares for us. And when we cry out, He is a good Father. He comes. Anybody else call your spouse babe? That's like probably one of the things you hear most if you come to our house and we're like busy trying to do something. Hey, babe, babe, hey, babe. And every time you hear it, it's like there's actually a response because we're communicating with each other. When I cry out, she listens. When she cries out, I'm listening. This is how crying out works. Cry out to God. Some of you might feel like, I've tried crying out to God before, and nothing has happened. And if that's you, I don't want to diminish that feeling of like, man, I've put myself out there to God before, and I felt like nothing has happened. And I'm not trying to tell you that exactly what you want to happen is going to happen, but I am telling you that when you cry out, He's there. And if you look, He will show you He's there. I remember one time we had little kids and we put them to bed early. Remember when they used to go to bed at like 7? Some of you who have little kids, you're like, yeah, we go to bed at 7 and then we just have our lives. Like, I don't remember what that's like, but we put our kids in bed. And then my wife, Amy, just has this feeling like, I think I smell gas. And I go outside and I smell like campfire and I go back inside. I'm like, I don't think it's gas. She's like, no, I think it's gas. You need to call the fire department, call the non-emergency line, see what's going to happen. I said, babe, okay. And so I called the non-emergency line, and they said, you smell gas? Get everyone out of the house right now. And so we had to go get our kids out of bed and go out into the street where we had the exact same smell outside that we had inside. It was so annoying. But what did we think was going to happen? We called them. They came. They helped. That's exactly what God does. And when you cry out to God, you learn who He is. And I love this story because it tells us so much about who God is. God is powerful. He is more powerful than the things that overwhelm His people. God is protector. He puts Himself between Israel and their enemies. God is a guide. He makes a way where there was no way. God is miraculous. Not only does He make a way where there is no way, He does it in a way that you could never predict and you could never make happen on your own. There's something comforting about that. When He makes a way that you don't even know how He made it, but you're going there, God is mighty. So first, you need to cry out to God. The second thing is this. Sometimes you just need to be still. Watch God fight your battle. I don't know what that battle is, but I would imagine there's something in your life that might feel overwhelming right now. And yeah, you have a part to do. Your first part is to cry out to God. And after you cry out to God, your second part is to be still and see what God does when you cry out to him. The chariots are coming. And of course, if you looked at the physical enemy of Israel versus Israel, we've got these Israeli people who were slaves. They didn't probably have weapons. They didn't have horses. They definitely didn't have chariots, or I don't know, maybe they had some bows and arrows. I don't think they did. They were outmatched, but it wasn't their battle. Anybody here into boxing? August 29th, there is a heavyweight championship boxing match, like heavyweight champion of the world. I've actually a picture of the two guys. This guy Atauma from Great Britain and Herjavec from like Eastern Europe. And these guys, I actually am a heavyweight. I don't know, maybe like 210, 215 right now. I'm the same weight as the heavyweight fighters. And so technically, I'm in their weight class. But can I tell you, no one is expecting me to show up at this fight and take my shirt off and step into the ring. How weird would that be? And it looks like there's some guy that is being escorted from the ring by the police. Like, no, that would be so stupid. I would never do that. Do you know why I would not do that? Because that's not my fight. The thing that you feel overwhelmed by is just as much your fight as that's my fight. I'm not going. I don't have to fight that battle. That thing that overwhelms you can and will be overwhelmed by the power of God. Expect it. Believe it. When you do this, when you be still and you watch God fight your battle, you actually get to live in victory, even when it doesn't feel like victory. I remember once I finally made it from the inland part of the lagoon to going to the other side where all the rest of my family and a couple friends were. I remember one of the moms, she had such an easy time getting there. I was jealous. And she said, I found that if I paddle really hard, I don't go anywhere. But if I just take a paddle and then I wait, I start to glide, and then I take another paddle, and then I wait, and I start to glide some more. And I didn't say this, but I thought, could you have told me that 45 minutes ago? Oh my gosh. She had to just let the momentum catch with the paddling. And yeah, you have an oar in your hand, right? Like, God doesn't want you to literally never do anything. You have a part. You probably know what your part is. But there's a lot of other things that you could do to try to combat whatever is overwhelming you, and that's not your fight. You need to be still and let God fight your battle. And then, just like the Israelites did, they took a step that didn't feel like a possible next step. But because God made a way where there was no way, creating walls of water and dry ground at the bottom of the Red Sea, this is what you and I do. We take the next step of faith into the impossible path that God is creating for you. This is really important because God is creating a way. He is creating an impossible path that you get to walk in. Your life is going to be full of doing things that you never thought would have been possible. And it's not so that you look great, it's so that God looks great. Nobody reads the story of the Exodus and says, wow, those Israelites were amazing. We say they were kind of dumb. But man, wow, God, that's what I want my life to be. Some of you are like, yeah, sometimes you do sound kind of dumb. That's okay. I'm not about making myself look great. I want to live a life that says, wow, God made a way. God did something miraculous. And I want to walk in it. I want you to walk in it. It's something we see over and over again in fiction. Going to the place and doing the thing that you previously thought was impossible. And the reason it's over and over again in Scripture is because we were meant to live it in real life. It's going to platform 9 3/4. It's Lucy Pevison opening the wardrobe and walking into a wood. It's Neo taking the red pill. It's building a baseball field in a cornfield. It's the thing that you're like, I didn't even know that would be possible. And maybe even right now, you know what that next step is. But that's what I'm asking you to do. Take the step of faith into the impossible path that God is creating for you. Because when you say, I didn't even know that was possible, that's when you found it. They will think you're crazy for walking into a full-blown sea. They thought Moses was crazy for building an ark when it had never rained. God is asking you to do something impossible, and it doesn't seem like a viable path. There's, so many areas in my life where I've seen this in small ways and in big ways. Like, for one, Amy and I felt called to homeschool again this year. We love schools. We love teachers. We serve the teachers here breakfast on Friday. So we're pro teacher, pro school. We have some amazing teachers in our church. We have people who go to school in our church. But the Lord kind of has given us this conviction, not that we're trying to make everyone do this, but we feel called to homeschool again this year. And we were like adding up the thousands of dollars that it was going to cost for curriculum and the activities that we felt called to. And a lot of our curriculum we feel called to do is Christian curriculum. And so the government doesn't pay for Christian curriculum, which is fine. But we didn't have a way to do it. But we still decided, okay, we don't know how we're going to pay for it again, but we think God's calling us to this, so we're just going to keep stepping towards it. And halfway through the summer, we had a couple that supports us say, hey, we want to help your kids with their homeschool curriculum. We're just like, oh, didn't even know that was a possibility. I lived a very comfortable life in Texas, working for a huge church. They probably have like 3,000 people there now, and I could have retired there. But we felt called 7 years ago. We felt like God was calling us to San Marcos, California, to start the Hills Community Church, to reach people in this city. And it felt like an impossible task. But man, I'm 7 years into it, and it has been the adventure of a lifetime. And God has provided in miraculous ways over and over again that I would have never been able to predict. Most of the early part of my young adult life, and teenage years, into my 20s, even into the beginning of my 30s, I never thought I would get free from pornography. I prayed over and over, God, please take this away. I don't want to struggle with this anymore. I feel so ashamed. And I served at churches. I went to seminary, still struggling with my secret porn addiction. I got married. I had kids. And I never thought I would be someone who talked about my porn addiction from a platform. But can I tell you, God has set me free? I never thought I'd be able to say it's been years since I've looked at pornography. But there was an impossible task, an impossible path that God was making for me to be able to walk in. And it's led to an incredible ministry where I've helped other guys walk in freedom. So if you want to get free from porn, you come talk to me. I would love to help you because there is a way, even when it feels impossible. Maybe for you, there's a struggle that you need to start being honest about and sharing about. And it feels impossible, but you need to believe God is going to make a way where it feels impossible. In a few minutes, we're going to have some prayer partners in the back, including me. We want to pray with you about whatever the thing is that feels impossible in your life. Maybe there's a meeting you need to go to. Maybe it's time to go to AA. Maybe it's time to check in to a rehab. Maybe it's time to call your sponsor. Maybe there's just a way that you need to step in and volunteer to help someone else find freedom. So cry out to God. Be still and watch God fight your battle. Take the next step of faith into the impossible thing he's calling you to do. And then here's our last thing that we're going to do. It's 2 parts. First of all, trust in Jesus. First and foremost. We always, always, always trust in Jesus first. But then, trust in a leader who will help you follow Jesus. I know there are leaders who have let you down. But this chapter doesn't end by saying, and the people trusted the Lord, period, next chapter. No. If you look at the end of the chapter, here's how it ends. It says, the people trusted in the Lord and in his servant Moses. In other words, they trusted in the Lord first. Always trust in Jesus first. Don't ever trust a person more than you trust in Jesus. But always, trust is meant to be ordered. We're meant to trust in the Lord. And then there is somebody that God wants you to trust. And it's vulnerable to trust a person. It's vulnerable to trust a leader to guide you and help you. For some of you, I feel like I've had the opportunity to be that for you. And it's been an honor. I'm not saying it has to be me, but it has to be somebody. I'm also going to tell you, it doesn't need to be somebody online that you don't know. Because that's not trustworthy, trying to follow somebody's public social media life. That's not real. You need to trust someone who's a real person, who you can have a real relationship with. Trust in the Lord. Trust in Jesus first. And then, secondly, trust in someone who can help you follow Jesus. And at some point, they're probably going to lead you in a way where it's not a good move to follow Jesus. And maybe you need to take some trust back and maybe find someone else to trust. If I ever fail you, if I ever guide you in a way that you're no longer following Jesus, stop trusting in me. I hope that will never happen. But you need somebody. You need to trust the Lord first, and then you need someone who you can trust in that will help you follow Jesus. Going from slavery to freedom is relational. We are meant to do this, living in community, locking arms together. That's why it's important to keep showing up here on Sunday mornings. And really, even sitting in rows doesn't do it. You need to get in circles. Next week, we're starting community groups. We're starting Bible studies. It's smaller ways for you to connect with people around you. It's meant to be relational. It's meant to be sitting across for someone, hearing their story, letting them share their story with you, asking for help, confessing, praying for each other. That's how you go from slavery to freedom. It's relational. And when you do this, when you trust in Jesus first, and then you also choose to do the vulnerable thing of trusting in a leader who can help you follow Jesus, you become more stable. Wouldn't that be nice? You go from all over the place to like, okay, I'm grounded. I'm growing in my ability to be trustworthy, because guess what? Somebody needs to trust in you for you to help them follow Jesus. Maybe not today. Maybe you're not really following Jesus. And so today is not the day to try to get someone to, come with you as you follow Jesus. But as you grow and as you trust the Lord, there's somebody else that needs you. You become more trustworthy. Another thing that happens, you become more confident because you've got a track record in seeing what it looks like to follow Jesus and to see somebody else follow Jesus that you're learning from and growing from. You don't feel like you're alone in the journey. I feel like today I have adequately told you how bad I am at ocean sports. I'm going to just tell you one more story. Whenever we first moved to California, my brother-in-law came, and we got these big, 7-foot foam surfboards and went to the Oceanside Pier. We're like, let's try to surf. And so we paddled out, and then we didn't make it out because the waves were 6 feet. And then we tried again, paddled out, and then I took a break. and then after half an hour eating a hot dog, fueled me up, right? I'm probably ready now. I paddle out again. Finally, I make it past where the waves are breaking. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to catch a wave now. And so I'm terrible at timing it, but I'm trying to paddle and get up. And I got up one time, and I stood up on this board, this big 6-foot wave was crashing behind me, and I was so happy, I didn't even turn. I just went straight for like 4.5 seconds, and then the wave just took me. And I mean, it was one of those that just like pummels you down into the bottom of the ocean. It felt like I was 40 feet underwater. I didn't know which way was up. And it felt like a minute and a half that I was just stuck underwater, completely discombobulated. I had no idea where I was going. It was probably like 10 seconds. But it felt like forever. And I went back to shore and I was like, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "I think I almost died." I said, "Me too." And so we didn't go back. But can I tell you, that wasn't the last time I tried. My friend Tim is a great surfer. And he's experienced. And he's got a lifetime of wisdom and knowledge and skills. And he's got a board so big that it makes my legs cramp whenever I try to put my legs around it. And he took me to Doheny, where the breaks are not 6 feet, and they're nice, big, pillowy waves that don't make me die. And I caught multiple waves when I went with Tim, and I felt successful. And we went and got bagels after. I even went in San Diego County. I was reminded of this when we were talking before the service. I went in San Diego County to surf. What was this beach? I went to Terra. I did a Carlsbad beach surfing, and I didn't die. He said it was very, very low. The waves were low. But what I'm trying to tell you is, I could have given up. But there was somebody that I could trust. And yeah, I trust the Lord more than I trust Tim. I'm not going to try to put that on him. And you need to trust the Lord more than you trust in any person. But maybe it's time for you to put your trust in a person again. And say, you know what? I need help following Jesus. Maybe it's time to join a group or a Bible study. Or maybe it's time to just ask someone to coffee and say, hey, I want to learn. I want to get better at this following Jesus thing. Because this is what life is all about. It is the process of going from slavery to freedom. And the enemy wants to drown you. He wants to knock you off course. He wants you to live in slavery. He wants the chariots that are chasing you to be the number one thing on your mind. Whatever that thing is that makes you feel overwhelmed in your life. Maybe it's that you're not getting traction in your career. Maybe it's that, man, I thought this relationship would be going this way and I'm overwhelmed because it just doesn't seem to be going the way I want it to go. Maybe it's finances. Gosh, it's so easy to get overwhelmed by finances. It feels like a mountain of chariots coming after you sometimes, doesn't it? But I want you to see what it looks like for a chariot to be destroyed. Because I want you to have faith that it's going to happen. Because the things that overwhelm you can and will be overwhelmed by the power of God. One of my favorite movies of all time is Gladiator. This General Maximus becomes a slave. And in his journey from slavery to freedom, he becomes a gladiator. And he has to fight. And he's being a general with all these other gladiators in the ring. And at one point, they reenact the Battle of Carthage. In the Battle of Carthage, there were chariots that overwhelmed a group of soldiers. Only in the movie Gladiator, they weren't expecting Maximus to be there, right? And so I just want, it's very, very short. I could barely show any of the movie for it to not be graphic. But I want you to see, don't worry, it's not bloody. There's no one dies in this scene. But I want you to see, I want you to get an image in your mind. Because the things that overwhelm you, the chariots in your life, they're going to be overwhelmed by the power of God. So let's show that clip. Let's show Maximus and the overwhelming of the chariot. The guy with his cup. Wasn't it satisfying to see that chariot just lift off and start to roll? I want you to imagine what can it be like for you to kind of elevate your faith, to really believe that the thing that overwhelms you in your life can and will be overwhelmed by the power of God. What is your chariot? Is it money? Is it the debt that you're not able to pay off? Or maybe it's the having too much month at the end of your paycheck, right? Like, what is it? Is it not getting ahead in your career? Is it the people you need to take care of financially? What if you said, you know what? I'm going to cry out to God. And whatever he tells me to do, whatever his word says to do with my money, that's going to be how I live my financial life right now. I'm going to have self-control. I'm going to give. I'm going to save. Even though you feel overwhelmed financially, what if you said, I'm going to be still and let God fight this battle and live within the confines that he has for your finances? That's how you see the chariot start to roll. Maybe it's your calendar. You've got so many things, if you think about the next week or the next month, so many things that you need to do that are on your calendar. You don't have any free time. You don't have any me time. It's overwhelming. What if you said, you know what? I'm going to cry out to God about my calendar and say, God, I need your help. Make a way where there was no way in my calendar. And then you say, I'm going to prioritize the things that his word tells me to prioritize. I'm going to prioritize time with the Lord every single day, as often as I can, because I know it's good for me. I know it's my greatest good. Even though your calendar is full, saying, you know what? I'm going to be still. I'm going to let the Lord fight this battle for me. I'm going to prioritize coming to church, being part of a group, bringing our kids to youth group. That's how you start to see the freedom, see the chariots rolling. It's satisfying to watch that chariot roll, isn't it? That's what I want us to see in our lives. Chariots will roll. This is your future. Everything that overwhelms you can and will be overwhelmed by the power of God. The question isn't whether it's going to happen, it's whether you believe it. Chariots will roll. I want us to be a people who believe it. And when we see it, I don't even want us to be surprised. I just want us to celebrate with each other. It's going to happen in this community. It's going to happen in your lives, your family's lives, your neighbors. This is why we're here. We want to see God do the impossible. I don't know what it's going to look like for you. I can't predict. But whatever that thing that's overwhelming you, you know that feeling of overwhelmed isn't the end of the story.